good exercise, though it's a lost art these days, and uh, we are somewhere getting distracted or distanced from reading and into various other activities, following the social online websites. But we all know the advantages. So, continuing this further, you have already discussed in the previous session what reading is. So, actually, recapitulating that it's a process of constructing meaning. And I request all of you to just silently give this passage a reading, what's there on the screen, and find out some keywords that you think are important. Keywords that you can highlight. First, I've highlighted for you, it's reading is about constructing meaning. So, any other words that are important since you've just discussed these a few minutes back? Any other word or phrase that strikes out with respect to reading? Okay, Nishu ma'am has responded. She says prior knowledge, right? Any more clues? Absolutely right. The others are also, please participate.
To
There's
construct
prior
meaning,
knowledge. Uh, I beg your pardon, please repeat.
to construct meaning,
Yes, to construct meaning.
to decoding the symbols,
Yes, decoding symbols. So, this is how we understand reading.
Text.
Yes, understanding the text, prior knowledge, constructing meaning, clues, decoding
and
the text
knowledge, to gain knowledge.
to gain knowledge. Absolutely right.
Yes.
Okay, so some basic skills required for reading, and we have decoding. It's it implies decoding or sounding out words. I'll just check the settings so that you're able to read. Yes. So decoding is sounding out words in the first step in reading. Children can decode when they understand each letter of the alphabet has a corresponding sound. So children learn how to look at the words in print. They isolate each separate sound, then blend them. So from isolated letters, then they start blending and they gradually move to understanding words. The second skill is vocabulary. I'll not discuss much. There's one word that stands out, and that is sight words. I think most of us are aware. The common words such as the, is, were, was, and said. These are very high frequency words, frequently used in speech and books. So this is what we call sight words. Then an important component of reading is reading fluency, ability to read accurately with expressions. And then comes comprehension. So it's a basic reading skill, but it's not just fluency that we check, it's also understanding what the text is about. So when we talk of decoding, some examples that I have tried to share here, probably, in fact, before I start with this, other than books, what other things can be read by the students? It's difficult for us as teachers to make the students interested in reading books. So, other than books, is there something else we can use for improving reading skills?
They can read
Yes,
newspaper.
right. We can use magazines, newspapers. What else? Pamphlets. Yes, right. Rappers.
The board
Absolutely right,
signs
Jyoti ma'am. Signboards.
and
Yes.
the board signs.
So, yes. So, other than books, there are short text also that we can begin with. Now, talking of newspapers, um, till few years back, in fact, the year before this, Our
Ma'am,
children
we
in the
can
Delhi
use
government schools
we can
used to
use
get.
cartoon magazines that are also available in library.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can use comics. We can use books
Computers.
with which have lot of pictures just to get students interested. So, talking about the newspapers, till some time back, our government school children used to get a news. They were provided a newspaper by the department. It was the students' edition, and it had some really interesting articles which would make students interested to read. And the second advantage of those newspaper was being a students' edition. There were topics that students get to read and were simultaneously asked in the writing skills questions. So there were topics of social interest, there were topics related to environment, there would be topics related to international politics, but explained in a very simple way. Sports would be a section, and what's happening in the world of education, how other schools are, the kind of activities other schools are engaged in. So those newspapers, in case that practice resumes in our classrooms in the next academic session, do make use of the newspaper. It's a great resource for English teachers. So how do we use decoding in newspapers? Pick a focus for the day, the first suggestion, and it says, perhaps students are working on a few sight words this week. I just select an article and ask them to identify the, they, this, there. So this way, you're actually exposing them to the high frequency words and the pronunciation. It's also the pronunciation that they find difficult. The next day, probably another focus, you can ask them to look for words that start with the same sound. So it's W, it's Wednesday, watch, welfare, and so on. And another suggestion is that you can set a weekly goal for your beginner students, write it on the calendar, and once they achieve that, just that will be a proud moment for them. So reward them for their efforts in finding those words from the newspaper. Coming, talking of newspapers, rhyming words. I didn't say rhyming words, Madhuri ma'am. It wasn't rhyming words. I apologize if you understood, if you heard that. Okay. Talking of
Words
the
sound
newspapers.
similar. Hello. Am I audible,
Okay.
ma'am? It's
Ji,
Madhuri.
ji,
This side. Ma'am,
yes.
then, the words sound similar. I mean, that are called
Okay.
rhyming words, right?
Sounds, right. Sounds that have similar, words that have similar sounds. Okay. I got your point. Right. And you can always pick up some passages from the newspaper and practice tenses, practice articles, practice determiners. So that again can be done. So decoding information. Vocabulary we've talked about. The more one reads, the more enriched is the word bank of students. The key is to bring in the previous knowledge of words to infer meaning of new words. So whatever words they know, we have to use them to build upon their word bank. So how can we help children guess or understand the meaning of words that are relatively new to them? So this is one trick. This is an example from class ninth Moments textbook. The lesson is The Lost Child. If you can see the sentence in here, it's in a shade of blue. It says, I want that toy, he pleaded. His father looked at him, red-eyed, in his familiar tyrant's way. Now, if the student doesn't know the meaning of tyrant, how can we help him or her arrive at the meaning? So the clue is that children have to look for words around that particular words, and those will help him understand the meaning of new word. So the helping clues can be the child pleaded, looked at him red-eyed. So it can be inferred that father is angry and a child is asking for a toy fearfully. So the meaning that we understand is tyrant means a scary or angry person, an oppressor who is feared. So first they identify the clues, they guess a meaning, and probably the next step would be the teacher telling them the meaning or referring to a dictionary. So this is what I implied by vocabulary in context. So discussing fluency, we have this in speaking, we have this in reading, writing, everywhere. So fluency and reading imply it's the ability to read a text accurately, quickly, and with expressions. So this is a common observation that readers who have not yet developed fluency read slowly, word by word. Their oral reading is choppy because fluent readers do not have to concentrate on decoding the words. So the first step, as we discussed in the previous slides, it's decoding. And once a child or a reader attains fluency, then they don't need to stop on every word and understand what it means. Now, fluency again has three domains. So it's about reading words correctly. Then the second concept is automaticity. It's recognizing words automatically without having to decode or process them. And prosody is when the reader includes the use of intonation, phrasing, and expression while reading. So even Pooja ma'am, your mic right. Thank you. So while you're doing silent reading or loud reading, all these three come into play. So even when you are reading silently, you could be reading with expressions. So it's important that we've noticed in our classrooms when we ask children to read, uh, they they often ignore the punctuation marks. So this is something that we need to emphasize, that punctuate your fluency. Where there's a full stop, they need to pause, or where there's a question mark, they need to read it like a question mark, and they need to read it like a question. So there's a visual on your screen, and I request all of you to share your thoughts on it. Take some time, take a few seconds, and how do you understand it? How is it applicable to our learners, to us as English teachers? Yes, so anyone, please answer. Learning to read, then it says reading to learn, and in between, there's some common ground. Is there any way this is linked to our children or to us, or some observations that we've made about our students' reading habits? Anything, maybe a sentence, or maybe some words, or maybe something you've noticed in primary classes. Yes, participants, I'm still waiting. So in that case, can I ask, in fact, I'll have to ask someone, any one of you, to unmute and answer. Um, Monica ma'am, are you there? Monica Saroha ma'am, are you there with us on the call? Okay. Um, so as we have seen in the initial years, it's all about helping children to read. It's helping them, it's learning to read. So in the primary years, this is what is our focus on. And we assume that when somebody reaches the secondary classes or the secondary stage, reading should be so advanced that they use it to gain knowledge about other subjects. So, from learning to read, we have to help the child reach the stage where he reads to learn. But unfortunately, our children take even longer to begin to start reading or get interested. So, silent reading is the key. If in case they get interested in reading texts, that's what will help them. So, they have to read a lot of textbooks also. Uh, we've seen that children who have opted for studying maths and science in English medium, they often face problems when it comes to terminology or writing answers. So there also reading comes into play. So first it has to be all about learning to read, helping them read words, then sentences, and then the next stage is you read to learn more things. So when we just talked about reading fluency, I want all of you to take a minute, read it silently. So I'm clocking the time and your time starts now. Read this passage silently in 60 seconds. So we are halfway through, a few more seconds left. And stop. So how many of you could read it in 60 seconds in this stipulated time? Just type in the chat box yes or no.
Ma'am.
Okay, some yes. Okay, a few people were able to read it. That's great. Looking at the pictures given after the text, are they arranged sequentially? Quite a few yes in the chat box. Are the pictures arranged sequentially? Okay, Pragya ma'am says yes, yes. Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
right. Okay. So we can give some short text. We can do such small such activities in the class. How do you do it? Now all the schools have a KN projector. You can use that. It's a multimedia projector. Uh, you can use your AV room or the CAL lab project some text like these or worksheets, just as there are reading worksheets also, and the entire class can do it together, so it's quite easy to do it. Or in the present times when you're using the WhatsApp groups for teaching, probably you can share such small text with the children and just ask them to read it in a minute and find out how many of them could do it or not. So of such activities which do not take much time. um, the next slide talks about certain views about reading skills. So there's one traditional approach and then there's one constructivist approach. A little theoretical, but let's get into it. So till now, there's a group that views reading as it says that learning to read and write begins at the age of 6.5. Then reading develops first and then writing. We agree with this. The third point says literacy develops through learning isolated skills such as phonics and writing the alphabet. Okay. Fourth one says experiences of the child before schooling are irrelevant. And the fifth point says children all pass through a predetermined scope and sequence of readiness and reading skills, and their progress should be monitored by periodic formal testing. So, these are some of the things that we have been doing as English language teachers. Now, there's another approach which says learning to read and write begins very early in life. And how many of you agree with this? So you can type agree or disagree in the chat box. It says learning to read and write begins very early, whereas the traditional approach says it begins at the age of 6.5. Okay, Jyoti ma'am says she agrees that it begins early. Mukesh ma'am too agrees with that. Next, right. Meenu ma'am also says agreed. Then we have reading and writing develop concurrently and interrelatedly in young children. We see this happening now. Yes, this also happens. So the third one says literacy develops from real life situations in which reading and writing are used to get things done. So the more practical situations or the more applicable the knowledge you've gained, it definitely helps you develop that skill. So when one of the participants shared that children also get to, other than books, children also get to read pamphlets, newspapers, or magazines, or cartoon comics. So that's something which children feel that these are real life situations. So talking of the next point, it says children learn literacy through active engagement. Definitely yes. Um what we have in our class is a very passive participation when it comes to reading a text. After this, it says being read to plays a special role. Uh, this is something important. Whenever you read out something to a child, they enjoy it. So we've seen parents doing it nowadays, and before the child goes to the bed, some of the parents, they have a habit of reading out a storybook or talking to them about how the day went by. Or so reading, being read, plays a special role in literacy development of young children. This is one habit I think which we should promote. And the last one here is learning to read and write is a developmental process. Children pass through stages in a variety of ways and at different ages. So, in contrast to what was said in the traditional approach, there's no set pattern about, at this age, the child would be able to read sentences, and at this age, some paragraphs. So, there's no such